Private First Class Donald M. Sparks was lost near Chu Lai, South Vietnam. The army and his parents presumed him dead. Until, that is, they got a letter from Vietnam.
I think of home all the time and surely hope you are all well and have been blessed with some happiness. I haven't forgotten your birthday, Mom. I hope you took the day off.
Donald Sparks never came home. His parents think he might still be alive. Convinced that Americans do survive in captivity, Vietnam veteran Vincent Arnone plans a rescue mission into Laos. At a camp in Thailand, Arnone meets anti-communist Lao guerrillas. With them, he plans to liberate American POWs, held, he believes, across the Mekong River.
The Thais consider what I do illegal. The Laos consider it an offense they could shoot me on sight for.
These men, the so-called Free Lao, are relics of the secret army that years ago fought the Laotian communists.
So these Americans were seen only 2 weeks ago.
Somehow, Arnone has to decide who's telling the truth. Did this guerrilla leader really see American prisoners just 2 weeks before? Even if Americans are still held, can they be safely retrieved? This directional microphone, the guerrillas hope, will let them see in the dark to evade communist Pathet Lao patrols.
I have to go back to my country and go get some information from my people over there.
Do you know what area the Americans are being held in?
They told me they still stay in the Muang Wang Angkam.
Which is right by the Vietnamese border.
Yeah.
Today, some members of the U.S. intelligence community insist POWs were left behind. You knew that there were live Americans left behind on the ground in Southeast Asia?
Indeed. As early as '74, when I saw a film at Fort Bragg depicting, shot by a reconnaissance aircraft, depicting a Caucasian stripped to the waist, holding an American flag as the aircraft repetitively flew over the village where he was located. He was identified later as an Air Force captain.
I did not exclude in Laos that due to the general inefficiency of the situation that there might be some left behind.
A ceasefire, internationally supervised, will begin within 60 days from this Saturday. All Americans held prisoners of war throughout Indochina will be released.
In their own eyes, the pilots who bailed out over North Vietnam were prisoners of war. To the North Vietnamese, they were pirates, criminals, to be played with, humiliated, if possible, broken.
To stop the noise, they would put a bit in your mouth, which was usually a steel bar wrapped around the shorts of the man before you who had been tortured, and then drawn so tight that they would squeeze your nose, and if your eyes started to glaze over, they knew it was tight enough. And you screamed through your eyeballs because you could get no sound out. So you knew once they started this that if you vomited through your nose, you were dead, and there was nothing you could do to stop the pain while they were torturing you.
This enemy would invest unlimited time in the psychological defeat of its prisoners.
The first night in the main prison, they took me to a press conference downtown. And they gave me my flying suit to put on. I remember the press coming forward and taking pictures of my feet. And later on, it dawned on me that when I walked, I was just leaving blood footprints because my feet were raw. I was in shock and in deep pain. I was just vaguely aware of where I was and who was out there in front of me.
It made no difference that Larsen's back was broken.
They'd tie me up, bent over double. They'd pull the rope so tight that it cut off circulation. It cut the tendons in both of my arms, pulled the arm right out of the socket. One time they picked me up in this ball and set me on a table. And when I wouldn't answer his questions, he just reached out and just pushed me off the table, all tied up.
My impression of the North Vietnamese people is that they are a peace-loving people, and they are dedicated to resist the bombing of their country.
POWs discovered that for Hanoi, they were as much part of the war as what happened on the battlefield. Pawns in a propaganda strategy.
5 times I went through the ropes and things of that nature. Then on the 6th time, they literally crushed a vertebrae in my back, caused apparently my heart to stop, and in essence psychologically broke me. The pain became so much that I could no longer control myself.
We had some real tough nuts over there. They were able to break the toughest of the tough.
No nation, simply because of its power or strength, has the right to impose their will upon another nation.
After weeks of torture, Colonel Robinson Reisner struggled to give the Vietnamese as little as possible.
Everyone has a breaking point.
As presented in this East German propaganda film, American prisoners sing of their compassionate treatment in Hanoi.
Being tied and led off to their village, I was frightened and feared for my life. I was doctored and fed by their fireside, just as though I had caused them no strife.
In history, the Vietnamese had used their prisoners, calculated their value. This time, they were weapons in the propaganda war. They were also currency, bargaining chips. As the Paris peace talks loomed, some POWs heard from guards that not everyone would go home. Several were warned, "We can keep you forever."
They said many times that when the war is over, we will not all be released, that some would be kept.
Even before the war ended, some members of the US intelligence community believed the Vietnamese would hold back prisoners. Commended by senior officers for his fastidious accuracy, Jerry Mooney analyzed intelligence for the National Security Agency. Mooney's job, eavesdropping on enemy radio traffic, gave him a unique insider's view into North Vietnam. As the air war progressed, Mooney was listening. When a US plane was lost, he monitored Vietnamese military communications, then tracked the movement of American survivors.
Normally, it was very stringent military communications, like they'd say, we have shot down an F-111 and have captured the 2 pirate bandit pilots alive.
Mooney was able to follow prisoners by radio as they were moved from one Vietnamese unit to another. Very few, he says, were executed.
The North Vietnamese, not me, but the North Vietnamese said they had captured them alive. And then with the correlated operational data from our side, it proved it.
God damn it, that AAA scared me.
As the war went on, Mooney listed pilots he knew had been left alive on the ground.
We felt that we had enough information to prove that they were in hands, they were healthy, and they were alive.
And they didn't come home.
And they did not come home.
Warned not to disclose classified information, nervous about talking publicly, Mooney lives on the northern edge of the United States, a refugee from the intelligence community. The clear message of NSA's radio intercepts, he says, was that the Vietnamese placed high value on certain prisoners, experts in weapons systems.
They didn't go after them to kill them. They went after them to capture them, because these were high-tech pilots, pilots with special knowledge, crews with special knowledge. You don't go out and take something and then throw it away if you really want it, and they wanted these gentlemen.
Right. Number 1, Rocky. Okay, I got you. I don't have to.
No one disputes there were men alive on the ground who never returned. Mike Basilovac, whose F-105 crashed near Hanoi. Ron Dodge, filmed alive in Vietnam, whose body came back 15 years later. David Hardlicker, whose voice was heard on Pathet Lao radio, pleading for his release. They could have been executed or died of illness. The dispute is about numbers.
By the end of the war, there was probably close to 480 names on the list, of which I carried around 302 or 304 as being alive.
More than 300 men who you were absolutely certain had survived into captivity.
To me and the people who worked for me, yes.
March 1973, Operation Homecoming. 591 men came back. 3,500 MIAs did not. In most cases, little was known of them. Many must have been dead. What shocked Jerry Mooney was that hardly any of the men on his list, presumed survivors, came home.
How many of those men came back?
Approximately 5% or less, 10 or 12.
So you knew that more than 300 men had survived and had not come back?
Yes, sir.
We shall, under no circumstances, abandon our POWs and our MIAs, wherever they are.
Mooney says he was told not to worry. Behind the scenes, efforts were being made to get the MIAs back. No one, he claims, at NSA or the Pentagon doubted men had been left behind.
We all knew it.
No doubt.
No doubt anywhere. If you can find anybody at my operational level that says we got them all back, I'll be totally surprised.
General Eugene Tye was Director of Intelligence at Pacific Command. Later, he headed the Defense Intelligence Agency. With access to all intelligence sources, he knew better than anyone how many pilots might have survived. How did he feel at Operation Homecoming?
My emotions, of course, were such that extraordinary joy, joy at the strength of the people we brought back and so forth. Our disappointments, of course, were that many did not come back that we had expected to come back.
His figure for presumed live captives who didn't return is even higher than Jerry Mooney's.
My recollection is it was 400 or 500 that we expected to return who we felt were alive in captivity did not return.
All over the country, families of missing men waited.
I sat from, the entire television coverage, and I don't know how to describe it to you. It's just that sensation of, please, just one more. It's not that you want anyone who did come home not to be there. You're not trying to trade somebody, but couldn't there just be one more?
Applause, applause. Each one of you courageous guys deserve applause. You sacrificed, you paid the price of freedom's cause. Though many believe we never could win, our choices were grim, but you had faith in him.
For Richard Nixon, it was a moment of pride.
God bless you all.
A moment to rejoice with the POWs who did come back.
Made us all feel 10 feet tall.
I think that we were so anxious to get out that we just took what we could get and left.
For the first time in 12 years, we can observe Armed Forces Day with all of our fighting forces home from Vietnam and all of our courageous prisoners of war set free and here back home in America.
That was one of the most devastating statements that was made because it clearly indicated that our men were going to be abandoned.
The cooperation which North Vietnam promised to give us in making a full accounting for Americans listed as missing in action has not been satisfactory.
Nixon did still talk about MIAs, but somehow his remarks at the end of a long speech weren't much reported.
We were sort of politely asked not to make a public stink, to be quiet and be sure that the prisoners they were acknowledging got out safely. And then, of course, they would look after those who were missing in action.
Nobody wanted to damage the president's hour of glory.
I want to thank you, Mr. President. Not for any one thing, just for everything.
To the returned POWs come to dine at the White House off Strawberries and Champagne, Nixon was their liberator.
We felt a tremendous amount of gratitude towards the man. He was our hero. He could do no wrong. He could say no wrong.
Isn't it great to see the president here relaxing tonight? That's the greatest thing in the world.
Yet, as Nixon and Kissinger both knew that night, several hundred men expected to return from Laos had simply vanished.
Well, we had been told they'd been moved to North Vietnam, And if they had been in there alive, they would come out from there. Sometimes it makes me wonder how gullible, you know, were we?
Laird Gutterson was one of the very few POWs at the White House banquet who thought men had been left behind. Earlier, he'd been given a classified order not to get involved in the matter of the MIAs.
Once we sought to question the order, we were told not to discuss it out loud. Then we were asked if we understood it, and when we indicated we did, they collected the piece of paper and shredded it.
We didn't want to make waves, I guess is the biggest thing, and perhaps we should have made waves, but it was kind of like wait and see what happens, and you wait and see nothing happens.
The MIA issue would never go away. Today, there's first-hand evidence of live Americans left behind in Southeast Asia. European, American, and Asian eyewitnesses claim that POWs were retained by the Vietnamese. They tell of Americans in prison camps, working in fields, displayed for propaganda. Some of the stories correlate, yet they're told by people who left Southeast Asia years apart and who couldn't have known each other.
Did he tell you what had happened to him when he was held in the prison camp?
He was tortured in the prison.
One refugee, now in the United States, nervous of being identified, says he saw Americans still in Hanoi right after Operation Homecoming.
I saw them last time. It's the end of 1974, and one day I go up and I see them anymore, and after that I never see them anymore.
So this was a year after they were supposed to have been returned to the United States?
Yes.
How many of them were there?
About 20 or 25 people.
So you saw them exercising?
Yeah.
And what were they wearing?
The first time I saw them take a very light brown shirt and brown pants.
Brown shirt and brown trousers?
Yeah.
And this was prison uniform?
Yeah.
His home, he claims, was across the street from an army barracks where Americans were held. He saw them regularly.
Were you surprised that they hadn't gone home?
Yeah, that's big news on the outer streets. Everybody talk, you know, how come right now still got American people still in Hanoi.
After the war, thousands of refugees left Vietnam for Europe and the United States. Professor Han Vi was one of Vietnam's intellectual elite, a member of the Communist Party who chose life in America. Once he'd been part of Hanoi's privileged inner circle, artists and writers who served the party. Refugees like Han Vi, arriving in America, brought detailed claims of prisoners still alive.
Hi.
The then Director of Defense Intelligence called it a tidal wave of human reporting, nearly 1,000 first-hand accounts. Han Vi described meeting Americans in Hanoi.
We went to two places to interview them. At each, there were between 30 and 40 people. One place was in Hanoi, the other in a suburb south of the city. We managed to talk to a few prisoners. We felt they were relatively well settled. Their lives were spent not in prison camp, but in government houses made of corrugated iron, where they had beds and blankets.
Swedish engineers running a paper mill in Vietnam, funded by the Swedish government, report seeing Caucasians at a prison camp nearby, standing out among a crowd of Vietnamese prisoners.
I saw two taller and whiter people in there. And I mean, my memory today is that there was American.
When prison guards noticed him watching, Arvling was arrested. The Swedish ambassador, he claims, told him to be discreet about what he'd seen. Otherwise, he'd have trouble leaving Vietnam. The Defense Intelligence Agency, looking for firm evidence, was frustrated by stories that could neither be checked nor dismissed. In the confused border region where Thailand meets Laos and Cambodia, Craig Oliver, distributing food to refugees, claimed to have seen Caucasians. They had Pathet Lao guards.
They looked very emaciated, dirty, ragged, weak. The clothing that they had was quite torn and tattered, and they were barely able to walk on their own.
In the secret war in Laos, nearly 600 men were lost. Just 9 came back. They'd been picked up by the North Vietnamese. The rest, a couple of hundred men believed captured by the Pathet Lao, vanished.
No American prisoner held in Laos was released from Laos. As far as I'm concerned, it continues to be a black hole.
At the time, the United States was reticent about the scale of its involvement in Laos. Royalist Laotian pilots, armed, trained, and organized by Americans, raided communist strongholds on the plain of Yars. Direct American strikes were secret but relentless. Up to 100 a day, flown by men like David Hardlicker, whose F-105 met enemy fire over northern Laos. Today, David's pilot brother Leo flies safer skies.
That time he climbed to 10,000 feet, stated that he was on fire and he was getting out.
Leo thinks his brother may still be alive, a captive.
To live in an environment where people despise you, they don't love Americans over there. They never have. We blew up their grandfathers. We blew up their sisters, their brothers. We bombed the nation. They'd have no love for a man like that, just living in that environment with only your memories and so on. It would be awful.
Before the war ended, David Hardlicker's picture appeared in Pravda. He was alive.
And I was appalled. I couldn't believe what I saw.
From inside Laos, a clandestine radio station ran a tape of David's voice, pleading for his release. Of 600 men lost in Laos, the U.S. acknowledged just 5 POWs.
We never received any official lists of men who had been captured in Laos. We knew several had, and so we carried several as prisoners, but mostly they were in the MIA category simply because we had no intelligence about what happened to them.
However, there are those who insist the U.S. had much better intelligence than it would admit. General Kamhu Busarat was head of security in the Lao government. He was highly thought of by U.S. diplomats in Laos at the time. Today, he's a U.S. citizen. This camp in Thailand, where Lao refugees scratch a living, is the nearest he can get to home. During the war, Busarat ran police and military intelligence. Every week, sometimes every day, he says he reported to the U.S. Embassy names of Americans taken prisoner. By the end of the war, his list was in the hundreds. So if men were still alive, if men had been captured, or if men had been shot, that would be reported to you?
Yes, that if the man was alive or the man was killed, they report that to me.
So when you received that information, what did you do with it? Where did you go?
When I received this information, I give that to the American embassy.
Busarat is bitter about what he sees as American indifference to the POW issue. He contends U.S. officials downplayed the number of prisoners because they didn't want to disclose the scale of U.S. involvement in the secret war. So by the end of the war, how many names do you think were on your list?
I think in the end of the war, about more than 200 people.
200 men who you were absolutely certain had survived?
Yes.
We never accepted those reports. We wanted to pin these things down. We wanted to have more and better evidence. But we did have, even though we had no specific indication, we did have very strong feelings that there were a number of Americans alive and captive in Laos.
The CIA had more than strong feelings. It had hard information. Its planes supplied remote communities. It ran the war. In November 1970, a then classified CIA report using, it said, confirmed information, listed prisons where Americans were held.
Ban Nakai Nua, major enemy prison. As many as 20 American POWs have been reported. Kum Kwan prison complex. 40 Americans or other foreign nationals are being held. Hang Long, a prison in a cave. American, Thai, and Lao prisoners.
Many prisoners were held near Sam Noa, the communist headquarters. Intelligence about them included detailed reports of Americans and Lao prisoners hidden in underground caves. There were even aerial pictures of the cave complexes. This one had a recreation area and grew its own crops. The key to the war was the CIA's private airline, Air America. Its skillful pilots supplied anti-communist guerrillas fighting the Pathet Lao. The guerrilla armies were headquartered in remote settlements upcountry, reachable only by air.
Either behind him or off his left.
Jean de Bruin was part of a crew dropping buffalo meat and rice to friendly forces.
And as the plane gets over the drop zone, the C-46 goes vertically, and my brother was a kicker, which means that he needed to roll the pallets of rice out the back end of the airplane on the drop zone.
The plane was shot down over enemy territory. De Bruin was imprisoned in the same camp as U.S. Navy pilot Dieter Dengler. Eventually, Dengler escaped, with a story of primeval conditions shared by prisoners.
I was hung in this tree on my feet, and they would bring a ball of ants, an ant ball. The ants live in those gigantic balls, and they shoved that. Oh, first they smeared honey in the face, and then they jammed that ball over your face, and it just makes it very miserable. Now I laugh about it, but then all the ants go in your nose, go in your ears, go down your throat, and I hung there, and I just kept passing out, and they cut you down, put water, and hang you up there again.
In the worst camp, there was De Bruin.
The guy looked out, and by the door had a red beard, and it was Jean de Bruin, and he said, "My name is Jean de Bruin." I said, "Oh, hi guys, hi Jean."
Ghastly as it was, the communists went to great lengths to keep their prisoners alive.
The policy of the country, of the government, the governing force, which was North Vietnamese, was keep them alive.
The capital of Laos was still peaceful. For American families arriving to check on missing prisoners, it was like stepping through the looking glass. There was a king who hadn't been crowned, a monument whose cement had been stolen from US aid, and scores of military attaches who ran the war. The government nominally neutral, Vientiane was shared by Royalist Laotians, Americans, even the Pathet Lao, who went shopping every morning in the market. The chief communist representative in Vientiane was Soth Petrazi.
And I said, "Quite frankly, Mr. Soth, what I have been doing is I came one halfway around the world just to find out if my brother is alive or dead. Now here is the picture that shows my brother in your prison. It was taken by your people." "Yes, I know of your brother's case," Mr. Soth said. "He's alive." I asked him in what condition were the prisoners being held, and he said, "They are being treated adequately." I said, "Where are they being held?" And he said, "In the Chapone area."
A stream of worried families went to see Soth Petrazi. Repeatedly, he confirmed American pilots were being held. Mrs. Christos Bogages wanted to find out if her husband was alive. Mr. Soth was affable.
He made that quite clear that they are here in Laos, but obviously there are some names known, but he said, "Why, if we cannot give a complete list, as Hanoi did when the bombing stopped in Hanoi," he says, "we cannot now."
You were sure that there were live American prisoners at that time?
Well, he certainly indicated to us that day that there were prisoners there. If he says there's a list, there's a list.
So, how many prisoners did the Pathet Lao hold? In 1969, America asked about the fate of 158 men. Soth Petrazi agreed they were holding at least that number. By the end of the war, the figure was higher. Retrieving pilots shot down in Laos could be even harder than in Vietnam. Part of the reason, terrain. Mountains or thick jungle.
This thing won't go any faster. Okay, for it, that's the boy. Go get him. Okay, just stand by, baby. We're coming in to get you. Stand by. Keep going. How you feeling down there? Any bad guys or anything in the area? Did you see anything on your way down?
This rescue came just in time. The enemy pinned back, a pilot recovered. It didn't always go like this. General Tai, then intelligence chief at Pacific Command, accepts that by the end of the war, around 300 men had been captured alive.
Certainly there was and has been information. You know, we had crews who were not able to operate in, I'm talking about helicopter rescue crews who saw live Americans on the ground and so forth, and these compiled into numbers, aggregated to what you're talking about.
And it's hitbound at KISS.
Men were lost in Laos who didn't appear on the MIA list until years later. Anne Holland's husband vanished when a radar base in the Lao Mountains was attacked by the enemy. But to preserve the illusion that Laos was neutral, his loss had to be kept secret.
They told me at the time that I couldn't tell anyone. I couldn't even tell my kids their dad was missing, and couldn't tell my husband's brothers and sisters, and I had to keep it quiet.
Mr. President, there's been growing concern, sir, about deepening U.S. involvement in combat in Laos.
There are no American combat forces in Laos.
Mel Holland was one of 16 Americans on this mountaintop in Laos, radar technicians directing the bombing of Hanoi. On the eve of being posted here, Air Force Sergeant Holland was redesignated a civilian. Site 85, as it was called, remained one of the best-kept secrets of the war.
Nobody knew about those men missing over there. I contacted the American Embassy in Laos, and they said they had no record of my husband being missing anywhere in Southeast Asia, let alone in Laos. And yet, William Sullivan, who was the ambassador in Laos at the time, is the one who signed my husband's death certificate that was issued after 3 months.
Neither North Vietnam nor the United States was anxious to admit its role in neutral Laos. When Site 85 was overrun, some men were thrown off the precipice, others, according to intelligence reports, possibly taken prisoner. Mel Holland was victim in a secret war, a war in which more men went missing than the US could, at the time, acknowledge. In Hanoi, the Vietnamese were busy extracting all possible value from their prisoners. Taken from camps, POWs like Neil Jones were paraded in carefully orchestrated propaganda events.
Backed up to the gate was a large army truck full of soldiers with submachine guns. And tied about 2 or 3 feet back from the cab across the back of the truck was a bamboo pole. And I was to stand up holding onto that. And we would take about a 35, 40-minute ride through different sections of Hanoi. I felt I was the loneliest man in the world. I felt I'd never get out of there.
Jones had already been tortured. He was even more afraid of the crowd.
Again, the fear of the unknown. What is going to happen next? Was I going to be torn apart by that crowd, or was I going to be executed?
Appalling as it was, being displayed like this was protection of a kind. It proved you were alive and in the prison system. However, there were people who never entered the prison system at all, who were never shown off on the streets of Hanoi, and whose existence was unknown to other prisoners.
I am very much sorry for my criminal act against the Vietnamese people.
For instance, nobody knew about Donald Sparks, missing near Chu Lai, South Vietnam. The army and his parents presumed him dead. Then, 1 year later, they got a letter from their son.
I haven't forgotten your birthday, Mom. I hope you took the day off.
Sparks was being held alone at a camp in the south.
Then there is my kid brother. He is probably thinking of the service. He could probably get a hardship deferment and stay home if he wanted to. I have had a lot of time to think these past months. Often I am very ashamed of my past. Good Mom and Dad were always there to take over when I neglected work or got into trouble.
His parents would never have known their son was alive had his letter not been found on the body of a dead Viet Cong.
Thank you. May God bless and keep you all. Love, Don.
He never entered the prison system and never came home. Jerry Mooney at the National Security Agency, busy sifting enemy radio communications, became increasingly puzzled. Men known to have been captured alive weren't showing up in the prison system. Many were backseaters, not pilots but electronic warfare specialists who understood new weapons systems, the same systems that might one day be used against the Soviet Union.
These particular individuals would be held as special prisoners of war camps. They would be interrogated, and if there was any attempt or any indication that could be fruitful, we felt strongly that they would be moved on to more higher echelons.
Mooney's intercepts revealed particular Vietnamese interest in getting intact an F-111. More controversially, he concluded from the intercepts they wanted men too, military specialists.
You would have the early warning officer on board. You may have sophisticated weapon systems on board. You could have intelligence collectors that would have sophisticated gear or knowledge. So they would go after these people, specifically and dedicatedly, and get them.
For interrogation?
For interrogation.
Mooney feared it was China and Russia who wanted the men on his list.
What did you put against those names? What letters did you put against the names?
MB, Moscow bound.
That concern was shared by some backseaters flying into North Vietnam. Amongst them, Captain Mike Basilovac. His F-105G provided cover for F-111s, making strikes into the north. He told his wife some of his fears.
I think all of them were well aware that running the first-line high-tech equipment that dealt with Soviet defense systems as well as the defense systems that were being used in Vietnam, he would be very a prize catch.
Near Hanoi, Basilovac's plane, codenamed Crow-1, was hit by a SAM missile.
Crow-1's taking a hit. Crow-1, you're on fire. At the 2, right your wings. Okay, Crow-1 and 2 are bailed out.
Other men saw Basilovac and his pilot eject safely.
My position right now is 2 miles to the north of 2 chutes, which are going down to the ground in good shape.
Crow 2, this Crow 3, I see your emergency squawk at this time. Are you over the survivors, over?
Later, Sam Peacock, another pilot on the mission, asked an intelligence officer why no attempt had been made to go in and rescue them.
And he made the comment, well, you know, there was no reason to. We know they'd already been captured.
On a trip to the Far East, Mrs. Basilovac says she was told by the Vietnamese her husband was alive. On her way home through Thailand, she was approached by a U.S. intelligence contact. Her husband might have been moved to China. It was tantalizing, but inconclusive.
I want to know. I need to know. I think I have a right to know.
Before Operation Homecoming, some POWs in Hanoi received a curious threat.
The officer in our camp, the political commissar, told me that when the war is over, not everyone will be released, but for the good of humanity, some men would be kept.
In the relief the war was almost over, such concerns were easily dismissed.
We today have concluded an agreement to end the war and bring peace with honor in Vietnam. In particular, I would like to say a word to some of the bravest people I have ever met. The wives, children, the families of our prisoners of war that are missing in action. When others called on us to settle on any terms, you had the courage to stand for the right kind of peace, so that those who died and those who suffered would not have died and suffered in vain.
At the Paris peace talks, the U.S. insisted that Hanoi was responsible for all prisoners, including those held in Laos. Soon after the peace agreement, the Vietnamese produced their first official list of POWs. The prisoners in Laos weren't on it. The families of the MIAs were shocked. When the U.S. expressed alarm, a Pathet Lao list was hurriedly presented. Instead of the several hundred names expected, there were just 9. Roger Shields found it
unbelievable, that it was just not credible and not logical.
A few days later, Henry Kissinger set off for Hanoi. Publicly, his euphoria seemed undimmed.
We are prepared to begin a new relationship with North Vietnam.
Privately, Kissinger would confront the Vietnamese with America's best evidence on surviving MIAs. Men like Ron Dodge, filmed in captivity.
In fact, the evidence as such was incontrovertible. The Vietnamese claimed that they knew nothing about any of it, that they had given us a full list, that there were no other prisoners, but they promised to investigate.
Pressing them again and again and turning around and walking out of the country with no strings attached are two entirely different things.
In Paris, Kissinger made his final pitch to Lee Duc-Tho.
On that occasion, he said they had investigated and there were no such prisoners, and my information must be incorrect or worse, a deliberate attempt to provoke them.
February the 21st, a truce in Laos. After insisting they held only 9 prisoners, the Pathet Lao dropped a puzzling hint. The implication was there were more prisoners, but they wanted direct negotiations with the US, hence American recognition.
We were told by the North Vietnamese, go talk to the Pathet Lao, which would have involved recognition, which we were not anxious to do, bargain with them separately for the American prisoners and for an accounting.
Despite American threats, just 9 men came out of Laos. Then, US intelligence picked up its first sign of a Vietnamese policy to withhold prisoners. There'd been a meeting of district officials to discuss holding American and ARVN, South Vietnamese, prisoners hostage.
At the meeting, it was made known that only a third of ARVN personnel have been released. Like an undisclosed number of US PWs, they were being detained as hostages.
Did the Vietnamese decide, as a matter of policy, to keep back prisoners? The intelligence report would eventually be backed up by South Vietnamese prisoners fleeing Vietnam. Some claimed they'd been held with Americans in the area mentioned at the meeting. Vietnam's legendary Forest of Darkness, the U Minh, where this refugee reported seeing 2 Americans.
I saw they are very tired, thin, you know.
The 2 men, both black, were made to cut down trees and punished if they didn't work hard.
They don't have enough food to eat, no medicine at all.
And how were they dressed?
They dressed popular Vietnamese uniform, you know. That means black shirts and black
shirts?
pants. Yeah, black shirts and black pants.
Black pants, black
Yeah.
trousers?
Mm-hmm.
The Vietnam War ended with the world order, in one sense, undisturbed. The US still mightily wealthy, Vietnam one of the poorest countries in the world. Hanoi wanted American money, and Nixon, in a letter to North Vietnam, promised to provide it. It would be an investment in peace, a way of guaranteeing the ceasefire. However, there was a problem. In Congress, nobody wanted to give a cent to the men who tortured POWs.
Under the circumstances, you would never expect the Congress to appropriate. As a matter of fact, it would have been political death for any congressman to have voted reparations for Vietnam after the war.
General Tai concluded the Vietnamese would hold Americans prisoner until reparations were paid.
There was certainly enough evidence that, in my judgment, to convince me there were a lot of Americans still held out there.
In the aftermath of war, thousands of refugees fled Vietnam. Amongst them, party members and government officials from North Vietnam, arriving in Europe and the United States. Many reported that American prisoners were still held. In Geneva, a former official of the Hanoi Foreign Ministry described seeing American prisoners after they were supposed to have gone home. He asked a party leader why they'd been kept.
These people, these prisoners, were carrying tools, spades, for example. I was concerned. I asked him, why are these prisoners still in our country, instead of sending them back home? He looked at me, wide-eyed and smiling. And then he said, they will be valuable to us. later.
Voilà, tout ce qu'il m'a répondu.
Today, the DIA disbelieves that story. However, its former director, General Tai, is adamant. The Vietnamese hope to trade prisoners for aid.
The fact of the matter is that it's no strange bargain to them that they could trade, and as a matter of fact, we've got lots of records that they expect to get specifics in return for a pilot's return. A factory, for example, or words to that effect for various kinds of Americans who were held captive.
Unfortunately, perhaps, for any surviving MIAs, $3 billion in aid promised by Nixon was never paid. In 1975, a CIA source reported,
a number of Americans were being held in Hanoi pending agreement on American reconstruction aid. The Vietnamese were not stupid and would hold the Americans until $3 billion in promised aid was received.
So I don't think there's any naivete on our part at all that they had great hopes that they could bargain and trade these people off. Now, whether or not that ever became an issue in the negotiations themselves, I don't know.
The mystery was, if they held these prisoners, why not say so? Some people heard a disturbing echo in history. In 1954, France left Indochina in defeat. The Vietnamese returned only half the number of prisoners France expected. The French knew the Vietnamese and paid them, ostensibly for the return of dead bodies. Without explanation, live Frenchmen and foreign legionnaires followed the dead bodies out of Vietnam. Some were described as deserters. In the next 16 years, 1,000 men were released. According to French diplomats we've talked to, France paid several $1 million a year. Dealing with the Vietnamese could be extremely frustrating.
I was torn between the evidence on the one side and on the other, the refusal of the Vietnamese to acknowledge having these prisoners. Not that I consider the Vietnamese incapable of breaking an agreement, and of being totally ruthless, but if they had these prisoners, in order for them to be useful, they had to surface them, and they had to bargain with them, and that they didn't do then, and they haven't done since.
However, the Vietnamese also told the French they were holding no prisoners. As Henry Kissinger acknowledges, they couldn't very well have done otherwise.
Of course, if they had admitted that they had prisoners, they had to be extremely worried what President Nixon would do, since we would have surely used it to take drastic action.
At the Pentagon, Roger Shields announced there was no information that any Americans were still alive in Indochina. Operation Homecoming was over.
We were simply saying that we had not knowingly left anyone behind. We had no current information that would allow us to say, in this place, this American is being held captive and we want him back.
However, we've established that within a few months there would be compelling evidence of live Americans in Laos, evidence that today Roger Shields says he was never told about. In December 1972, Air Force Captain Thomas Hart, flying a Spectre gunship, was lost over Laos. A surveillance plane photographed what seemed to be the initials TH stamped out in long grass, 4 months after homecoming. Mrs. Hart was told the area had been overflown before. There was nothing there. The date, July 1973. The intelligence analysis concluded this was thought to be Captain Hart. It was years before Mrs. Hart discovered the picture even existed.
To provide a family with information that indicated a man might have survived would have put a great deal of pressure on the United States government. I mean, that's the only thing I can speculate.
You're saying that they deliberately withheld it from you?
If you don't give it to me, you deliberately withheld it.
Was there other unacknowledged evidence? Former Special Forces officer Liam Atkins says he saw film shot in 1974 of a Caucasian waving a homemade flag.
The film was shot by a reconnaissance aircraft at low level. He was holding an American flag at the aircraft as it passed repetitively over the tribal village where he was located.
And this was in Laos?
In Laos, yes.
Emmett Kay, an Air America pilot, was captured after the ceasefire, taken to Vietnam, then held in a cave in Laos. Later released, he told us his captors insisted that several hundred Americans were still alive and that many had been moved to Vietnam. Another former captive of the Pathet Lao says roughly the same thing. In 1975, Rosemary Conway, an American teacher in Laos, was arrested and charged with espionage. Taken to police headquarters in Vientiane, she says she repeatedly overheard her guards discussing other American prisoners. Apparently, they ran through lists of names, some of the names she could decipher.
The major had the list of American prisoners. In fact, two of the names that I remember distinctly were Donahue and Albright, and their names were mentioned being held at Chepon.
Dr. Kissinger thought most of the men had died. Today he acknowledges some might have survived.
I did not exclude in Laos that due to the general inefficiency of the situation, that there might be some left behind, not for any great ulterior motive, but either for revenge on some individuals or just out of neglect, and then they were afraid to surface them for fear of retaliation.
Indeed, we've established that in February 1973, after the Paris Peace Agreement, there was certain knowledge of Americans on the ground in Laos. After the ceasefire, Airman Peter Cressman complained in a letter that intelligence missions into Laos were still being flown.
It's morally wrong to participate in activities which may jeopardize a peace which took 12 years to reach, but also because I feel I may be participating actively in an illegal military mission. I have been taught that because of America's firm belief in truth and justice, we did not break our national promises.
Soon after writing that letter, Cressman's aircraft, an EC-47 intelligence gatherer, was shot down. The National Security Agency eavesdropped on a Pathet Lao commander. One of his units was taking 4 Caucasians to Hanoi.
There had been some difficulties in transporting the flyers, and he asked if these problems had been resolved so movement could continue.
What the Air Force told us was that 4 individuals, Caucasians, were seen approximately 65 nautical miles, but they had no information that tied them directly to that crash.
We are told NSA reported exactly the opposite. The 4 prisoners taken to Hanoi were the crew of the EC-47.
I wrote the message.
You personally wrote the conclusion?
Yes, I wrote the message and the conclusion, and I added White House on it.
And your conclusion was?
They were Americans. I also assisted in writing the briefings for internal use, and that was the crew of the EC-47Q. And when talking to DIA, I helped them with their briefing items, and they were in total agreement that was the crew.
Americans taken alive to North Vietnam?
Right.
Convinced that sons and husbands still survive, relatives travel as close as they can to Vientiane and Hanoi. In the bars and back streets of Bangkok, a virtual cottage industry feeds their hopes and their illusions. Con men offer false information about POWs they claim are still held in Laos. Fake dog tags are sold. Some families have lost a fortune. River towns on the Mekong are as far as you can get from Bangkok. Over there is Laos. Over here, in Thailand's nervous border region, former GI Vincent Arnone hopes to cut through the deceit. He believes Americans are still held on the other side. For Arnone, there's only one way into Laos. It starts here, at this guerrilla camp on the Thai side of the Mekong. He hopes that these men, the so-called Free Lao anti-communist guerrillas, will take him across the river to an area where, he says, POWs have been seen.
Someone's got to go get these guys. And if the American government won't, then I, as an American person, will.
Brave Lao soldiers, I'm very pleased to be back here amongst you. I want you to know that my people and I believe in your struggle against the communists.
The belief I have in them is that I've placed my life in their hands to go with them to either reconnoiter the area myself, or to wait in Laos while they do so, or to perhaps effect a rescue of some kind.
And my people.
Arnone doesn't care that others dismiss him as a Walter Mitty. He's more concerned about the Pathet Lao.
I have no qualms about what they'll do to me if they get me.
They might shoot you?
They might.
So these Americans were seen only 2 weeks ago.
This guerrilla leader says live American prisoners were seen in the area just 2 weeks before.
And how many have your men seen?
They told me that in the area of Chapone, 2 American POWs exist now. They're in fairly good condition. Now we do not talk of information that is months old, or many weeks old, but now only days.
Trouble is, the Free Lao have an axe to grind. Talk of POWs in Laos is a good way to engage American support against their enemy, the Pathet Lao.
And this is all I've wanted to do for the last 7 years now. And hopefully it will take just a very short time.
Has it ever occurred to you that maybe these people are telling you what they think you want to hear?
Sure, it's occurred to me. And it's a calculated risk, isn't it?
He leaves the camp tonight with a promise the Free Lao will take him across when the rainy season ends. Others involved in the POW issue are infuriated by freelance operators like Arnone, who they feel make the search for the truth much more difficult.
How confident are you that once across the river, those men can actually protect you and will protect you?
I'm staking my life on it. Nothing more I have to give than that.
The best evidence out of Laos comes from hundreds of refugees pouring into Thai border towns. Some of the refugee evidence correlates. Once it was backed up with US satellite photos suggesting the presence of Caucasians at a jungle camp in central Laos. Intelligence files contain refugee reports which the Defense Department evidently took seriously.
Source was polygraphed. Results substantiate source's claim that he had in fact observed Caucasians.
In the jail, there's many people that cannot talk English.
This refugee, now living in the United States, claims to have been held with 2 named Americans at a prison camp in northern Laos. The year 1978.
This is the name of the camp, Hoi Lang.
The camp, as his homemade map indicates, held a fairly large number of prisoners.
270 people.
270 people?
Yes.
And these are Laotians?
Yes, Lao, Chinese, and 2 Americans.
He claims he was held in the next cell to the Americans.
So in cell number 10 and cell number 11?
Yes.
The 2 Americans are held?
The 2 Americans.
And you are in cell number?
This number 9 is me living.
He was told to wash one of the prisoners and cut his hair so he could be moved to Vietnam. After his bath, the American prisoner was handcuffed once more.
When finished, take a bath, put the handcuffs again.
Not long afterwards, he says he found the American dead in his cell. He was shocked by what he saw.
Yeah, I think the rat eat eye and ear.
The rat?
Yeah, the rat eats the eye and ear.
The prisoner, whose name Somdi gave us, was buried nearby. He thinks the other American may afterwards have been transferred to Vietnam. Another former prisoner of the Pathet Lao describes meeting an American on the run from his camp. He says he advised him to go back, that escape was impossible. The incident apparently took place near Phong Sa-Li, a town in northern Laos. The man was terribly thin.
Oh, every prisoner know enough food to eat.
What language were you talking to him in?
In Laos language.
So he spoke a little bit of Lao?
They have accents American, but Laos language.
He was trying to escape, was he?
I'm sure.
Some intelligence comes from the Thai army. On the one hand, units posted up here on the border try to stop illegal crossings of the Mekong. On the other, Thai special forces have been known to mount covert missions into Laos and Cambodia. Thai officers say off the record that the refugee stories are often true. Some US intelligence people agree live Americans may survive today.
I suspect they were the prisoners of a number of the factions throughout Laos, and that they are very valuable in terms of bargaining materials and are still in that status. those that are still alive.
There's only one way to find out. Go in and see. This guerrilla group will check stories of Americans on the border between Laos and Vietnam. A directional microphone supplied by the family of an MIA will let them see in the dark to evade Pathet Lao patrols.
I have to go back to my country and go get some information from my people over there.
Do you know what area the Americans are being held in?
They told me 1986 American prison, they still stay in the Muang Wang An Kham.
Which is right by the Vietnamese border?
Yeah, by Vietnamese border.
After 17 days, the group reached its destination near Chapone, a regional capital. According to local people, Caucasian prisoners had been moved between different camps in the area before finally being taken across the border into Vietnam. The evidence from Laos was once so intriguing that the United States mounted its own secret mission to look for prisoners.
I became convinced of the possibility of Americans being in Laos in as late as May of '81.
Admiral Tuttle, then at DIA, recommended that the mission go ahead. After refugee reports of Americans held at a camp in central Laos, a satellite produced tantalizing pictures of a prison camp lost in deep jungle. There was an inner compound where some of the prisoners seemed taller than their guards. Beaten out in long grass was a number, 52, perhaps suggesting a B-52 crew. To avoid sending in white faces, a group of Hmong tribesmen was given cameras and told to check out the camp. To ensure the safety of the mission, they weren't told they were looking for Americans. In May '81, they got there, to Namarat in Savannah Ket province. Not knowing what they were really looking for, the mercenaries only took pictures of the outer compound. The compelling satellite pictures hinting at Caucasians in the inner compound could not be confirmed. Worse still, the papers published the story, making it hard for the frustrated planners in Washington, reportedly waiting with a Delta Force rescue, to go in again.
We didn't get the results we desired. And if there are Americans there, goodness gracious, what a tragedy. Regardless, there's a 2,400 at that time, 2,500 that we still have to account for.
Long after the mission to Namarat, refugees would continue to report live Americans in Southeast Asia. This man, now living in the United States, says he saw 2 Americans at a Vietnamese naval base in 1982. According to an officer, they'd been captured in Laos.
Hai người Mỹ đó họ mặc áo tù binh của Việt Cộng màu xanh lá cây, đi dép.
These 2 Americans wore green Viet Cong prison uniform, rubber sandals, and were guarded by 2 Viet Cong carrying guns.
Của Việt Cộng đi kèm mang súng canh chừng.
I know they were Americans because the commander told me there was an American prison camp on the base. They were pale and thin.
One of the most extraordinary stories from Vietnam concerns Bai Bang, a huge Swedish-run paper mill, Vietnam's largest foreign aid project. Some of the Swedes heard there was a prison camp nearby. Engineer Lars Avling and a colleague decided to take a look.
It was a prison, fence, bamboo around there, typical jungle prison with a tower in each corner.
In the camp, Avling says they saw 2 tall white men. Watching from near the main gate, he was sure they were prisoners just like the Vietnamese.
They was under the same status as all of the rest, and that's very clear. I mean, the prison was guarded, and whom shall be in there, how to be a prisoner.
Immediately, Avling and his colleague were spotted by angry prison guards and arrested. They were asked to sign an undertaking written in Vietnamese.
The Swedish management up there was telling us, please sign the paper, and they don't want to be any more problem regarding that.
And the paper was whatever it said, the condition of your release?
That's right. Yeah, I'll call it that.
The Swedish ambassador extricated them, but advised them to be discreet.
He told us that that's up to you, Lars, if you want to tell anybody about the story. But I mean, there will be a hell of a problem for you when you are coming out.
As it turns out, some of Arvling's colleagues at the paper mill were making similar claims. In January 1978, the US consul in Hong Kong reported to the State Department on a conversation he'd had with another Swedish aid worker.
While driving north of Hanoi to Bai Bang, he saw a young Negro man of about 25 years of age riding an ox cart.
The most bizarre moment came when a crew-cut Norwegian employee walking in the woods was arrested by police.
I heard they said the word "me" between themselves. "Me" means American in Vietnamese.
After a long wrangle with police, Gooding got the impression they thought he was an escaped American. Nearly 1,000 refugees claimed to have seen Americans in Vietnam. About 100 of them described an American living openly in Hanoi. That turned out to be Marine Bobby Garwood.
I want to see my family, you know. It's been a long time.
In 1979, Garwood came home to face charges of collaboration. If they weren't lying about him, thought General Tai, why would they lie about seeing other Americans?
I would suspect eventually some people can come to the conclusion it's all a great big show, and that there's no truth in any of the reports that you get, that somehow or other somebody is manipulating a large body of people all over the world to contrive to have them all report out that they've seen Americans at the same time or on a continuing basis. I find it very difficult to believe anybody can orchestrate that kind of a proposition.
Throughout the 70s and 80s, the Vietnamese made repeated attempts to link the MIA issue with concessions from the United States. Aid, admission to the UN, recognition. They would talk of providing a better accounting, searching for graves. Always, they denied they were holding live Americans.
The MIA issue was linked to anything, to any goals that Vietnam, North Vietnam had in Indochina.
There were various attempts to settle the issue by diplomacy. President Carter sent Leonard Woodcock, the labor leader, to Hanoi. On the eve of his departure, a CIA source reported,
"There are American POWs still in Vietnam, and they would not be released until U.S. financial aid was forthcoming."
In Hanoi, the Vietnamese asked the commission, which included Roger Shields, about the money they believed they'd been promised by President Nixon.
And that, of course, was one of the principal issues that they were concerned with, this payment of monies to them.
In turn, the commission wanted to know, were there any Americans left alive?
The answer finally was no. As we know, Bobby Garwood later returned to the United States, and he certainly was an American in Vietnam.
So they were lying.
Very clearly.
The Hanoi government handed over the remains of 12 Americans. One turned out later to be a Vietnamese. Another was a man they denied all knowledge of a few months earlier.
It staggers the imagination, I believe, beggars the mind. The history is one of duplicity, one of arguing technicalities and ambiguities, of anything but a straightforward approach to the problem.
I would like to express my sincere thanks to the government of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam for its kind welcome and gracious hospitality.
Roger Shields was irritated that Woodcock never presented to the Vietnamese folders on MIA cases carefully prepared by the Defense Department. Not long after the 12 bodies were home, Woodcock announced that there were no Americans left alive in Laos or Vietnam. He was relying on what the Vietnamese had told him.
He would have relied, I would suppose he was relying on the statement that we were given that no Americans were alive in Vietnam.
Soon afterwards, a CIA source reported meeting a Vietnamese government official who told him that Vietnam did indeed still hold live Americans.
These Americans renounced their citizenship and were placed in re-education camps. They will be expected to admit to their crimes and make a self-criticism, at which time they will be either set free and permitted to remain in Vietnam as full citizens or be sentenced.
To some people in the US military, it seems remarkable that after all this time, the United States has secured nothing more than a few remains.
Everybody thinks that Americans don't leave their buddies behind. Bullshit.
Mel McIntyre was a Special Forces sergeant who says he acquired evidence of live prisoners. He and his commander, Mark Smith, say their evidence was ignored. Right or wrong, they represent the exasperation of those who think the MIAs were abandoned.
You're talking people who have no feeling whatsoever for the individual soldier in the field. Their answer to all this is to build a black wall in Washington and put all their names on it, to pacify you and I. Do they care about soldiers? They could give a damn about soldiers.
It would be unfair to accuse this administration of not caring about the MIAs.
And I said to all the nation, and most especially to all of you, that we write no last chapters. We close no books. We put away no final memories until your questions are answered.
As the administration knows, MIA families haven't forgotten. The answers have been long coming. According to a senior administration official, the U.S. has indicated it's ready to negotiate for any Americans still held. It wants an accounting, a return of remains, and a list of Americans living in Vietnam voluntarily. The release of anyone who survived years of hardship now depends on finding a formula that would allow Washington to make concessions and Hanoi to produce prisoners. On both counts, that's unlikely.
I would think if anyone has survived, the last thing we should do is pay ransom or acknowledge that they are entitled to something for breaking an agreement for 14 years to the untold suffering of the victims.
After all the years of pressure, the congressional inquiries, the intelligence stories, Jerry Mooney can't understand why there's nothing to show for it.
All thunder, no lightning. We talk and talk and talk, and yet nobody goes out and does anything.